An-Aestheticizing the Anthropocene, reading the hysterical sublime in T.J. Demos's visual rhetoric of capital and the environment, presented by Matthew Flisfetter and Chris Hyam.
Posthumanism and Anthropocene theory have become particularly prominent in the humanities in recent years. Together, they share concerns about the overlapping dilemmas of global climate change, digital automation, and artificial intelligence or machine learning, corresponding to the age of the Anthropocene. In their response to these conditions, posthumanist theorists propose dissolving the hierarchical and dualist conceptions of the human-non-human relationship, often with the explicit goal of evading anthropocentrism. As a result, many posthumanist theorists conceive the existence of a flat ontology that could build greater equality between humanity, nature and non-human animals, and artificial intelligence, avoiding the privileging and foundational violence of humanity found in previous historical moments of advanced industrialization and colonialism.
In contrast with these views, which are centered on the Anthropocene and critiques of humanism, human subjectivity, and anthropocentrism, others have emphasized the centrality of capitalism and its global impacts as a world system under the rubric of the Capitalocene. Aligning with the perspectives of the Capitalocene theorists, our view is that post-humanist and Anthropocene theories express unconscious anxieties about the contradictions of 21st century capitalism aesthetically and rhetorically, which are displaced onto the figure of the human subject, anthropocentrism, and humanisms more generally. They therefore seek to deconstruct as illusory the very category of the human subject, along with its representational conceits. We claim that contradictions in the post-humanist perspective can be understood through its aesthetics and rhetorics, and therefore ask what ideological function is served by the concept of the Anthropocene and the post-humanist resistance to anthropocentrism. Perhaps rather than proposing an aesthetic, the product of the Anthropocene rhetoric, we claim, is instead better framed as an anestheticization of the political. This is one of the claims made in T.J. Demos's book Against the Anthropocene, Visual Culture and the Environment Today, which we will use here to open up into a discussion later on of our conception of the aesthetic category of the hysterical sublime.
In his book, Demos presents a critique of the visual rhetoric of Anthropocene theory. Demos refers to images typically used to support and legitimize Anthropocene theory, such as space nav images representing global internet and transportation traffic, satellite weather graphics, images of the Alberta tar sands, and other images of oil disasters, such as the BP Deepwater Horizon underwater spill cam from the 2010 explosion in the Gulf of Mexico. While these images are often used to legitimize the rhetoric of the Anthropocene, Demos argues instead that they are in fact representations of the networks of global capital and transnational corporations. Demos proposes that the rhetoric of the Anthropocene and associated connotations of the latter in the images he analyzes obscure existing inequalities present in environmental damage, as well as struggles against capital and the fossil fuel industry, homogenizing all of humanity into a single actor, although responsibility is more accurately tied to capital and the Capitalocene. Demos thus asks, how is the Anthropocene thesis abetted or contradicted by different kinds of visualizations? He notes the role that visual media play in reinforcing repeated claims in science literature and media that the shift in the Earth's systems owes to human activities, which have allegedly become the central drivers of geologically significant conditions in our present. The entry of the Anthropocene into visual media, he claims, helped to narrativize and represent abstract phenomena like global networks of catastrophe, disaster, and devastation, which appear to be the product of anonymous forces, or perhaps collective humanity as such as an anonymous whole. We agree with Demos, however, that the visualization and narrativization of the Anthropocene rhetoric helps to displace attention from the impacts of capital or the Capitalocene. We therefore propose that these kinds of representations are emblematic of what Frederick Jameson has referred to as the hysterical sublime.
Jameson first coined the term hysterical sublime in his early writing on postmodernism. In contrast to the sublime as theorized by philosophers like Edmund Burke and Immanuel Kant, which for them refers to the awe, fear, and fascination felt by human subjects against the power of the external world of nature, Jameson proposes the hysterical sublime as a concept used to grapple with the awe, fear, and fascination felt against the rise of new digital technology and media today portrayed in popular culture in TV series and films such as The Matrix, Black Mirror, Her, Ex Machina, and Blade Runner 2049. Representations of technology as expressions of the hysterical sublime, however, according to Jameson, are actually aesthetic expressions of collective fears about the contradictions of late or advanced capitalism and its growing global and transnational systems of electronic communication and networks of financialization. The concept of the hysterical sublime has remained underdeveloped since Jameson's initial coinage. Thus, here we appropriate this concept to reflect on the ways that representations of technology, as well as the rhetoric of the Anthropocene, displays capitalist destruction onto the figure of the human subject, human culture, and humanisms more generally. Instead of fear and fascination with nature or technology, we argue that today the hysterical sublime represents fear and disdain with the figure of the human, humanism, and anthropocentrism. While time does not permit a fuller development of the aesthetic conception of the hysterical sublime and its theoretical and philosophical points of reference in this short presentation, we hope to address any questions about our understanding of it during the Q&A discussion following the panel presentations.
Returning then to our focus in this presentation, we see through the kinds of aesthetics Demos identifies the presence of the hysterical sublime as we have come to define it. The growth of technology, which now encompasses the entire planet, from our digital devices to biotechnologies, industrial farming, agricultural science, data centers for our cloud technologies, petrocultures, fracking, fossil fuel energy infrastructures, and the growth of new smart cities, all of which continue to impact climate change and the environment, shows that no part of the Earth remains untouched by technological development. On many accounts, the crises of the Anthropocene can be thought at the point of intersection between two phenomena, that of climate change and that of automation. The two overlap, since the latter can be seen as exacerbating the former. When we consider, for instance, as technology writer James Bridle notes, that data centers and individual computers generate vast amounts of waste heat and require corresponding quantities of cooling, from the acres of air conditioning systems on industrial buildings to the fans that cool your laptop, all of which are contributing factors to carbon culpability, then it is easy to see how the age of the algorithm is tied into the age of the Anthropocene. The latter, however, presents intriguing contradictions with regards to the methodological position of human subjectivity and our ethical agency. As Daniel Hartley notes, at the very moment in which scientists are using the term Anthropocene, forcing us to focus on our natural existence as a human species and collective human agent, the post-humanists and new materialists are trying to problematize and move beyond the human as such. In our opinion, then, a dialectical and universalist humanism that we here advocate is both the methodological and ethical position from which we must come to assess the hysterical sublime underwriting the ideology of 21st century capitalism. As Jameson has recently put it, the glory of the Anthropocene has been to show us that we really can change the world. Now it would be intelligent to terraform it. As an aside, the kind of terraforming project that Jameson advocates is currently being developed by the Strelka Design Institute in Moscow under the directorship of digital infrastructure theorist Benjamin Bratton.
It's worth noting, too, that other recent media scholarship, such as Jacqueline McLeod-Rogers' McLuhan's Technosensorium City, also aims to rethink the dynamics between humanist and materialist environment planning. Although it doesn't fully align with our argument, Demos's analysis of the visual rhetoric of the Anthropocene helps us to further elaborate the role played by the hysterical sublime. The hysterical sublime, we claim, is the setting against which we can assess the visual rhetoric of the Anthropocene and posthumanist critical theory more generally to better grapple with the ideological mystifications of 21st century capitalism and its displacement of its own contradictions onto those of a homogenized yet politically and socially divided humanity in critical interrogations of humanism and anthropocentrism. Instead, we claim that without the humanist gesture to learn, to think, to understand, and to build, our collective future is fraught. In opposition to the homogenizing representation of a unified humanity expressed both visually and rhetorically through the Anthropocene narrative, which pits humanity against a harmonious nature, humanism, we claim, is a partial position already engaged in an antagonism with capitalism, not only as a world economy, but also as a world ecology, as a capitalocene. A dialectical and universalist humanism, in contrast, aims to universalize the material conditions for humanity and the world to thrive and to enjoy. The hysterical sublime thus signals for us not the contradictions of the humanist project, but the symptoms of its abandonment and its betrayal. Thus, we agree with Demos that Anthropocene aesthetics must be viewed more appropriately as an anestheticization of the political, a formulation that recalls Susan Buck Morse's response to the closing lines of Walter Benjamin's artwork essay, that our self-alienation has reached such a degree that it can experience its own destruction as an aesthetic pleasure of the first order. In opposition to such a condition in which an anestheticization normalizes non-contemplation and the downgrading of human collective action, a byproduct of the hysterical sublime, our goal, like that of Benjamin, is the politicization of the aesthetic. Thank you.